So good afternoon, everybody. I'm Brian Murphy from the Enterprise Academy, and I'm joined by Kevin O'Rourke and our special guest Maura O'Toole as well. I just want to welcome everybody, and I'm going to set out our agenda for today as well. What I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce Maura in a second, and then Maura is going to talk to us for about 20 minutes. Maura has also kindly agreed that she will take questions in a change from our regular procedure where we ask people to put their questions into the chat. We're just talking beforehand, and Maura was explaining to me the difference between a trainer and a lecturer, and Maura is quite happy to take questions as we go along. So if people do have questions and they do want to ask Maura questions as they go along, you can unmute yourself and ask Maura the questions, and we will take questions and answers at the end as well. So thanks to Maura for her generosity on that as well. I just want to say a little bit about the Enterprise Academy for those of you who have joined us who maybe haven't been with us before. What is the Enterprise Academy and who are we? Well, it's a multidisciplinary business unit within Technological University. And what do we do? Well, what we do is we take an innovative approach to collaborative talent development for workplace learners. The Academy partners with enterprises across all sectors to create flexible, scalable and accredited solutions. We address sector-specific, cross-sector and transversal skills needs, and our work is guided by work-based learning, recognition of prior learning. We're working with micro-credentials as well, and we're focused on the key drivers of change, such as sustainability and digital transformation, and now AI as well. And we're going to be having a conference on AI in June, but more of that anon. The Enterprise Academy is supported by Convene, and it's a collaborative project with UCD, funded by the HCI Pillar 3. Our goal is to increase higher education capacity to meet priority and emerging skill needs and help our enterprise partners in this regard. And I suppose our unique selling point within TU Dublin is we offer a single entry point for enterprise partners to engage with TU Dublin on talent development and long-term skill strategies. And we facilitate collaboration between enterprises and TU Dublin's 24 schools and 5 faculties. So we really do help external partners peel the TU Dublin onion. I do want to move on to now just introducing Maura, who we're delighted is with us today. Maura O'Toole is the principal trainer at Facilitrain. She's had a long career in the world of training. She actually started off working in administration in DCU, but she has had a very successful career in training since 1998, starting off as a banking software trainer. She's been an independent trainer running her own businesses since 2003, and she's worked as a consultant and a management skills trainer. She's worked with some real household names like Pfizer, Meta, AIB, and more recently, Maura with BDO Ireland and the CR2 group as well. We're also delighted that Maura has worked and is known to many of our colleagues with TU Dublin. She's worked on the Masters in Supply Chain with our good colleague Declan Allen, teaching HR, managerial behaviour and IT system modules. And I know, Maura, you were saying you're involved with Declan in terms of the judging panel for the Irish Logistics and Training Awards. So I'm going to hand over to you, Maura, and if people have questions, feel free. Maura has generously said she'll take them as we go along, and we will come back with questions at the end as well. So thanks a million, Maura, for joining us. It's much appreciated.
So thanks very much, folks. It is an absolute pleasure to be with you this afternoon. Kevin asked me to do this, and when I spoke to Claire McBride, she said that one of the reasons that she wanted me to do it is that I asked a very awkward and uncomfortable question at the Talent Summit last summer, and she remembered me because of it. So the question that I asked was, how are academic staff measured and rewarded for their teaching quality? And it went down like a lead balloon for many reasons, but it made me memorable. So here we are. So I'm going to do a 20 minutes, brief overview of the L&D landscape as I see it at the moment. Now, I am going to do some stats and so on, as I mentioned to Brian, to kind of give a bit of data and info backup to my opinions. But there is going to be a fair amount of my opinions in this. In terms of the structure of our session, I'm going to do just an introduction, some emerging issues, the forecast, what I think looking down into the future, and then ask me anything. It doesn't have to be something that I've covered during this session. It can be whatever you like. Just ask me anything. As Brian said at the start, if you have a burning question, if there's something that has occurred to you, just switch on your mic and ask. Engagement is absolutely brilliant for somebody like me. I want you to be engaged. I want you to be interested. I want the question to be burning a hole in you, so you have to say it. Let's start with some stats then. 91% of businesses are facing skills shortages. And they're probably not the ones you think they are. And that's where it gets interesting. So the most concerning capability gaps, the things that people are really exercised about, are leadership and influencing skills, technology design, programming, AI into one bucket, collaboration and team working into a bucket, and complex problem solving into the final one. And for me, the most interesting thing about that graphic is that leadership and influencing skills is at 36%. The second highest one is the AI technology programming, which is the one that we're hearing so much about. It's at 13%. That's kind of odd, don't you think? Except that if you think about it, when people are hiring in, when they are resourcing their businesses, if they have a need for programmers, they'll hire a programmer. What happens when they've had a programmer for a while? Well, they want to move that person on from being an IC, an individual contributor, into being team lead or supervisor or assistant manager or manager. And now they need leadership and influencing skills, and they don't have any. So while the whole thing is connected, an awful lot of it is actually coming back to people skills and innate skills. Which brings me on to some language and terminology changes. So we've gone from what used to be training, right? So whether it was close contacts with industry in the education sector so that we could call it training, or whether it was people like me developing and delivering training into businesses, we all called it training. Even the professional body was the Irish Institute of Training and Development. But that changed. It then grew into learning and development, because training is something that we do to people. Learning and development is something that people do, and we assist and support them to do it. So the atmosphere around the whole idea changed as well. Then we moved into talent development. Okay, now again, okay, and pardon the expression, but some of this is management consultant bullshit that they want they want to give it a new title so that some management consultant somewhere in the Big Four can make money out of telling people that they're doing it wrong. Some of it is that, for sure. But some of it is actually the underlying push within the industry to change how we're doing stuff and to look at talent development, to say, look, you're already a talented programmer. Let's develop you and assist you and support you to be more, not better, because they're already very good at something, but more. Now, there's an increasing push towards moving to talent enablement. And I know that sounds like, again, it's just a terminology, it's just semantics, it's just whatever it is. But this is the most interesting change of the whole lot for me, because this now is about saying to that excellent programmer, do you want leadership and influencing skills? Do you want to be a supervisor? as opposed to saying you have to be in order to get promoted, which is talent development. Talent enablement is allowing people to grow and get better in the areas they want to grow and get better in, not the areas the business says you have to do this in order to climb some notional career ladder. So that's actually quite a big change. And it's allowing for this idea, which has been around in sort of very high-tech spaces for a while, this idea that you can have specialists, and the specialists can be as well paid as senior managers. They're just not operating as managers. They're not making life miserable for everybody around them because they're trying to manage and they don't want to. They want to be specialists. Let them be specialists. Next bit of terminology change, which I found really interesting. I remember this at the Talent Summit last year. There was a whole piece about what do we call soft skills? Do we call them human skills? Do we call them professional skills? What do we call them? And there's this increasing idea now that we call them durable skills. And that is in stark contrast to technical skills, which are now perishable. Because what I learned to do on the technical side today, almost certainly going to be obsolete in a year's time. It's a completely perishable skill. And that's quite interesting in terms of what we do around talent enablement or learning and development. Okay, future of work trends and impacts then. So the future of work, obviously, hybrid. This is not news to anybody. There is a fair bit of pushback, mostly from people whose pensions are invested in real estate or whose are paying enormous big rents for buildings and they don't want to be leaving them unoccupied. But the future is hybrid nonetheless. But the impacts might not be quite as obvious. And there are a lot of impacts for people in the learning and teaching space. A lot. So potential impacts include hybrid implemented well is flexible. So the two people whose faces I can actually see on my screen here, Brian and Gerard, both work in a hybrid environment. Gerard has a preference for doing Mondays and some Fridays in the office. It's an odd choice, but here we are. Brian has a preference for Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. About 10 to about 3. Very flexible. Both of those should be accommodated in a proper, flexible, hybrid environment. Both of those can and should be accommodated. And so should everybody else whose faces I can't see. Their preferred in-office model should also be accommodated. Where does that leave us with learning and teaching? Because flexible working requires flexible development. And that's turning into a headache. So right at the start of this, I said, ask me questions, ask me anything, switch on your mic, don't worry about the chat box, ask me anything. How many questions have we been asked so far? That would be 0. Because engagement in this is actually really difficult. It's really difficult because people they're checking their emails, they're playing solitaire, they're doing something else. They're listening to my voice in the background, hopefully. Hopefully they're at least doing that much. But training, developing people, skills development in this environment is tough. And we're going to have to figure out possibly a better way of doing it than this. There is also going to be an increased focus on helping leaders and managers to actually lead well in the hybrid environment. A lot of people, there's nothing malicious about it, but they are very much out of sight, out of mind. If I can't see you, I don't care about you. And if I don't see you, I'm not going to promote you. And if I don't see you, I'm not going to develop you. Proximity bias is real. And it's going to be a huge issue going forward into the future. So in our leadership and management development, we're going to have to be thinking about giving people the skills to deliberately and consciously counter proximity bias, to ensure that they actually keep their people with them and manage people regardless of their location, or manage them well and manage them inclusively. Let's look at some graphs, because we all like a graph. The top 10 skills mentioned in online job postings in Ireland in 2020. Now, I put this up because I thought you might find it interesting. So it's basically, the stats are taken from the start, really. It's top heavy on the start of 2020 because there wasn't a huge amount of jobs being advertised during the lockdowns. Okay, so it is skewed towards that. Highest one was working with others. Excuse me, by some distance. Over twice as high as leading and motivating. Now, there's a couple of possible reasons for that. One is that people cause more chaos as a member of a team than they do leading and developing a team or leading and motivating a team. It's usually the people causing chaos that people have to lead and motivate and manage and do the conflict resolution and everything for. So it'd be better not to hire the people causing chaos. Put that one aside for a second. If we think of ads that go into Indeed.com or Monster.com or LinkedIn, even to an extent, the very high level executive managerial positions, they're not getting advertised anywhere. They're not. People are hiring by word of mouth. They're hiring from their network to a huge extent. So again, mentioned in online job postings in Ireland pushes the bar, pushes the level of these roles downwards a bit. Okay, a bit. So keep that in mind as you look at these numbers.
Maura, could I jump in? Can I jump in there? I'm gonna take you at your word in terms of saying that you're happy to be interrupted in your flow and ask questions. I'm really interested in that 75% in terms of that's the top skill by a long shot, working with others. And I'm wondering, and maybe it feeds into a theory I have, and maybe it's an ageist theory, but has the ability to work with others being damaged, particularly for, that new generation of students that we would have had in recent years, or people who did their leaving certs, kind of from their box room behind screens, and they weren't engaging with other people. And has that made it more difficult? And even before we had that COVID world, people were retreating into this online world anyway. I remember, in my age group, when kids went to school, they'd all be talking to each other and be boisterous on the bus. But I watch school kids going to school now, and they're just scrolling on phones, and they're not engaging with anyone on the bus, any of their peers. It's all electronic. And I'm wondering, is that the reason that we're finding it as a human race more difficult to work with others, to engage with others, or why is that the top scale?
Okay, so there's a fair bit to unpack within your question. So let me take the last bit first. Okay, working with other people, unless you're a completely self-employed person who does things in her own office, I may be describing myself, it's possible, but never engages with anybody else. And the one skill that every single individual needs in the jobs market is the ability to work well with others. We all know that, right?
Sure.
If you look back 10 years ago at the printed version of job ads, one of the things that you were most likely to see, and I know this from personal experience because it was one of the most popular courses 10, 15 years ago even, was managing conflict when you've got two members of your team killing each other. So I would submit that this has got nothing to do with the next generation not being able to work with each other. Okay, because this was in 2020. So this was before any of those impacts hit at all.
Okay.
And the top skill was working with others. I would also say, as the mother of a almost 21-year-old who did his transition year during the COVID year, during lockdowns, he spent all day, every day talking to people. All day, every day. He saw nobody. He spent all day, every day talking to people. He was on his headset, talking to people all day, every day.
Yeah.
His engagement with the outside world was actually probably bigger than it was if he was sitting in a classroom absorbing one person talking to him and telling him to sit down and be quiet. So there's a lot to what you're asking. I'm not sure it's as straightforward as some people are making it out to be. I do
Okay.
believe there's research that needs to be done. I completely agree on that. And I do believe that that research is going to feed into the people saying, oh, we have to get back into the office because the office is more collaborative. Is it though? Because my experience of offices 10 years ago was people sitting with their headphones on, trying not to smell the smelly feet of the person sitting beside them. There wasn't a huge amount of collaboration going on. Do you know what I mean? So people have agendas and they're grabbing on to what they think is going to be a persuasive argument as opposed to actually backing it up with any research. That's my feel on it.
I think I've opened the door here, Maura, because
I think you
I'm
have.
asking a question. I see Noel Brady. I think, Noel, you have a question as well. You're on mute,
could I
Noel.
just get you to switch on your microphone? Great.
Thank you very much, Brian, and thank you very much, Maura, for the invitation to enter the discussion. I want to maybe dig into this particular topic a little bit more and maybe talk to the other piece of that puzzle, which is the issue of fit, and which most organizations actually are more happy to find people that fit with their organization rather than actually dealing with the skills gap. So the working with others would be a mask for that particular piece, particularly around the culture. I would like maybe you could dig into that piece.
Yeah. Apologies if it sounds like I'm dismissing the question, because I'm not, because you're right. It's a real thing that people are saying. But in a lot of organizations, culture fit and hiring for culture fit are an excuse to allow people to give full rein to their biases. Mm-hmm. And that's all it is. The best teams, the best companies are truly diverse. Truly diverse. They're made up of extroverts and introverts and ambiverts and people that are absolutely obnoxious but have the most brilliant ideas. Culture fit puts a stop to an awful lot of that. I remember the one big example that I can think of specifically is in Meta. And Meta has a preference for hiring a particular type of person to fit with their culture. Okay. Now, when I say Meta, you've all got an image in your heads of, a young white dude in a baseball cap, board shorts, runners carrying a skateboard, who is an engineer. And you're right. That's their preference. That's what they want. They want the Harvard graduate who's too cool for trousers. And unfortunately, what that means is that in a lot of their teams, what they've ended up with is something that is very not diverse. It's very homogenous. They've only got one answer to a problem when a problem is presented, because They've got one standardized way of thinking about things. And that's a real danger with culture fit. I'm not sure if that answers your question, Noel, but I just had a bit of a rant about culture fit.
No, it's fine, and I fully agree, and I think you're right. But it is a default position for many organizations because that's where they're comfortable with. And I think in a sense, the fact that these skills are popping up on this working with others is in a sense a foil to that working with this company's others rather than others in general.
Yeah.
Anyway, thank you.
Yeah, completely agree.
Yeah.
It is not necessary to be an extrovert in order to work well with others. You just need to be managed well so that people will find what works for you. Okay, let's move on from that one. Post-pandemic. So if you look at these transversal skills, you can see the impact of the pandemic on these, right? So tolerate stress, adapt to change, apply quality standards, show responsibility, prioritize tasks, etc., etc., etc. What would you think? Excuse me. You don't have to answer out loud, obviously. But just maybe give me a show of hands for whether or not you think the order that they're in there is correct. Is that order match the rank that you would expect? Or does anybody have any strong feelings about which one might be the top transversal skill required in 2023?
Adapt to change.
Adapt to change. It's really interesting, isn't it? The impact that the pandemic had. Adapt to change is the highest. Next highest is work in teams. Doesn't matter how, but work in teams. And the others are kind of grouped, more or less, but the two standouts are adapt to change and work in teams.
Maura, that would reflect so much of what we hear in the academic literature as well around resilience and that coming through. In fact, certain CPDs and programs in resilience and building that adaptability have been, evolved as well. So that would very much fit with what we hear.
Yeah, it's a huge area. I mean, it was a growing area before the pandemic. Post-pandemic, it feels some days like it's all anybody's talking about is how do I get people to be better with change? How do I get people to be more resilient? How do I get them to do 60 and 70-hour weeks and be resilient? How do I get them to do 60 and 70-hour weeks and have time to think about their response to change as opposed to reacting? So for me, there's almost a contradiction in what some employers are trying to do. They're trying to say, you're stressed, you're burnt out, you're overloaded, let me send you on a resilience course. As opposed to saying, you're stressed, you're burnt out, you're overloaded, let me look at your workload. Is there room for the resilience course? Absolutely. Is it absolutely pointless unless you look at why people are doing 60 hours a week every week and being told to put it down as 48 so they're not in breach of European working time directives? Yeah. So again, we need to look at the contradiction of what some, not all, but some employers are doing around this stuff. Okay. Which brings us neatly on to issues for employers. Is it any surprise that employers with a bad reputation are finding it hard to A, attract people and B, retain people? No, absolutely not. So I should state at this point, unless I've noted it on the slides, the stats are from the CIPD HR Practices 2024 report. So the most recent set of stats available on this stuff. 90% of respondents had faced an increase in competition for staff. Now, excuse me, an increase in competition for staff is a very polite way of saying we're having to pay more than we want to pay in order to get the levels of staff that we want or the levels of experience that we want. 77% of respondents reported retention difficulties because there's no amount of money that you can pay people when they are subject to a 55% effective tax rate. There's no amount of money you can pay people to be miserable for 65 hours a week. None. There's €250 a week difference between a 60,000 salary and a 90,000 salary. Now, €250 is nothing to be sneezed at. But if you're absolutely miserable for 65 hours in that week, 250 quid all of a sudden seems like a very small amount of money. So people are having to pay more to get talent, to attract talent, particularly if their HR marketing isn't good and their employer brand is toxic. And then once they have them and people discover firsthand why it's toxic, they can't hold on to people. So let's have a look at the most impactful recruitment and retention activities. So have a quick look before I show you the other graph. Given these choices, which one do you think, or which ones do you think might be the most impactful? So flexible working practices, hybrid done well, investing in employer brand, so getting rid of that toxicity that I talked about, analysis of current and future skills needs. So not just hiring for now, but hiring for the future and assisting people with that. Upskilling employees and redesigning roles.
Right.
It's interesting because I would have said, without looking at it, I would have said redesigning roles. Because in my experience, people who are working 65-hour weeks don't really care what they're doing. They just want to get back to a 40-hour week or even a 45-hour week. And they want the role redesigned to do that. But the stats tell us a different story. So the stats tell us that it's about upskilling employees and then flexible working practices. And you know, the longer I looked at it, the more I thought there is a way in which that makes complete sense. Because if you're sitting in the office, you can't use ChatGPT to do your work for you and save yourself a few hours every day. Whereas if you're in your kitchen, you can put on a cup of coffee and write a well-scripted prompt and get ChatGPT to do some of your work for you. No.
Yeah, sorry. Hopefully you're not going to hog the stage here. So is this the perspective from the employer as what they feel is most impactful recruitment retention, or from the shop floor upwards? Because surely from a employee perspective, investing in employer brand, getting the toxicity out of the system would be more impactful generally than whether or not your role got redesigned.
Yeah, no, it's actually from the employer's perspective.
Right.
So if you think of things like the employer brand, the employer brand improving the employer brand, or at least the perception of the employer brand, only really makes a difference to how many applications you get for a job that's advertised with your logo and your branding on it.
Right.
So it's a stat, is what they get. So what they have what they can prove through their HRIS systems is that upskilling employees has a data-driven, they can see it, they can identify it, impact, has the biggest impact on their recruitment and retention activities.
But it's companies' reputations are based on how you make your members feel, not what numbers you can pump out in terms of how many training courses you've been on.
Is it because employer brand is two things. It's the formal and the informal. Okay, now the formal is how often they can get a PR consultant to get their name in the papers in a positive mention, okay, or give them a nice sort of shiny halo on Twitter or LinkedIn or whatever. It's social media, HR marketing.
Okay.
The informal stuff is if, again, the 6 people that I can see, so Brian, Kevin, Christine, Jared, Noel, and Julie, if you all worked for the same company and all of you are being offered training and upskilling opportunities and it's making you all feel pretty good, you're telling your friends and family.
Right.
So you are doing the HR marketing informally. And what they're discovering is that, say, if Julie goes on a really nice training course and it makes a huge difference to how she feels about her employer, but also how she feels about staying with her employer, she's not going to just tell her friends and family. She's also going to tell her college classmates and colleagues who might also be attracted to work in that business. So it's actual HR marketing. And unless companies are doing both, it doesn't work. Getting rid of the toxicity, the formal way doesn't change the informal. Upskilling does.
When you put those slides up, Maura, I was going to say I would have said that the one that I would have thought would come out first was the flexible working practices, and maybe I shouldn't be surprised on the upskilling of employees. And what I'm going to say now, I'm not against upskilling employees. That's what we're all about here in the Enterprise Academy. But is there a contradiction or a dichotomy there in terms of if somebody comes into a company or with the idea that I'm going to this company because they're very good in terms of upskilling and I'm going to learn things, when people are trained up, then that they move on somewhere else. So is it, I mean, all the time, okay, you want to have the best human resources you can, you want to help people develop, but can that work against retention as well? I suppose is the question I'm asking.
Yeah, so I want to break down that question into 3 separate sections. So the first is the Gen Zs, they don't want a job for life, and companies don't want to keep them for life. So companies are looking at 2.5 to 3 years as normal turnover. They don't want to retain those people. Good. We're done. We're gone. 3.5 years. Perfect. Gone. A lot of them don't even count that in part of their voluntary turnover that we'd like to fix number. It's voluntary turnover, but it's not voluntary turnover that we want to fix number. Those are the people that are leaving after 6 months or a year. It's though that they want to fix, because most companies have a learning curve. You go in, it doesn't matter how highly qualified you are or how highly experienced you are costing the company money for the first learning curve that you go into that company for. For some companies, it's a month. For some companies, it's as long as 6 months. So if you don't stay for twice that time, then it's not worth the company bringing you in, and it's very expensive. If you stay for long enough that actually they should be promoting you, if there were somewhere to promote you to, and your productivity starts going down, then that's also a problem. So they'd like you to kind of head off after a few years. you know? So that's one side of it. The other thing is in terms of the flexible working practices, upskilling kind of idea, is that everybody now is offering 2 days at home, 3 days in the office. That's bare minimum. So if you want to attract differently, you have to offer more than that. Everybody now is offering X, Y, and Z in terms of talent enablement, you know, management courses, leadership courses, AI courses, blah, 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 blah. Everybody's doing that. So if you want to attract, you have to offer more than that. So it's kind of a spiral upwards on both of those things.
Yeah,
If you want to attract what other people are not attracting, you have to give more.
That makes sense. I see that Julie Bernard has
Julie has her hand up
question
as
there
well. Yeah.
Thanks so much, Brian. Thanks, Maura. Really enjoying this conversation and what you're saying there. And I'm interested. I have a question about this relationship between talent enablement and what that actually means. You know, that focus on the individual and where the individual wants to go, as opposed to maybe what the organisation needs at that moment. And that idea of upskilling as being the very important, impactful activity. And I guess, and I suppose I'm speaking as somebody who was a career coach originally, and also, you know, supporting managers and senior managers, helping them develop, you know, in my current role and so on over the years. I guess I'm wondering, we put a lot of responsibility on managers in our organisation to support people's learning and career development. Yeah. And there's a lot of good things, good reasons why we do that. But how do you help managers think in talent enablement ways? Because it's the skills to have those conversations with colleagues, talent enablement conversations, as opposed to traditional career trajectory conversations, you know, different types of careers, combining with multiple responsibilities, stepping in, stepping out of career paths and so on. How does it make sense to ask managers to have that responsibility, or do we need specialist career support services? Yeah. And if it does make sense that managers have that responsibility, and I think it probably does, how do we support managers to develop the kind of skills and mindsets that are needed for talent enablement support, as opposed to, you know, you want that senior job, here's what you do to get there?
Julie, you actually answered your own question.
Is that a good thing?
It is, because right at the very start, you said you used to be a career coach. And actually, those are the skills we need to be giving managers. We need to give them coaching skills, not directive telling skills. We need to give them coaching skills. What would you like? Here are the skills that I think you have. What do you think you have? Here is where I think you are capable of going. Where do you want to go? What is your perceived reality? If we teach managers and we give managers the skills to coach, then we can absolutely give them those responsibilities. But at the moment, what gets most managers promoted is being a little bit authoritarian, quite a bit directive, fair percentage of control freak, and a fair percentage of perfectionist. And those people do not make innate coaches at all.
That's very helpful. Thank you. And that work, I think, of coaching is very hidden in organizations when it's done well. So that's a very helpful response. And I'll factor that into my thinking. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, let's do the last couple of bits. Factors contributing to employee turnover then. Workload burnout, cost of living, location, career change, work-life balance conflict, and career progression. Not what you think. So currently, in the current environment, the buzz, whether you're talking about, you know, the articles that are achieving the most hits on the Business Post, or the clickbait articles that you see on LinkedIn about employers having to pay more, about the cost of living, about blah, 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 about both millennials and Gen Z being so materialistic and all they're interested in is money. And all of it is bullshit. People want to grow and progress in their careers more than they care about the cost of living. Quite a bit more. Workload, burnout, work-life balance, conflict, and location all being kind of around the same number it's interesting to me in that I see them as being obviously very closely tied together anyway. If you're working somewhere that requires you to do a 2-hour commute each way, no amount of resilience training is going to change the fact that you're going to be burnt out in a year's time because you're exhausted. So location, work-life balance, conflict, and workload/burnout are very closely intertwined. And again, helping people to identify how they can move the needle on some of those as managers would be very helpful. And again, the answer is coaching, not direction. Okay, durable versus perishable skills. I'm just conscious of the time. Durable communications, teamworking, networking, prioritizing, thinking proactively, thinking creatively, thinking critically even, creative problem solving, not seeing a problem in every opportunity. How many people do you know? And again, you don't need to answer this out loud in case you're talking about your colleagues, but how many people do you know that when they're presented with an opportunity, all they can see are the problems? Right? It is a durable skill to be able to look at an opportunity and see the opportunities, not just the problems. So they're durable, all of them. Perishable skills are pretty much every technical skill that you can list, every single one of them. Everything from programming to Excel is entirely perishable. My primary degree is in IT. There's not a chance that I would be able to program the most basic of anything, because all of those skills that I learned in college, they're all entirely obsolete. The one thing that isn't, the one thing that has been durable from my IT degree is being willing to sit down and give it a go and just press buttons until it works. And if it doesn't, switch it on and switch it back off again, be grand. It's that confidence in dealing with technology is durable. Actually, which buttons you press, entirely perishable. The last of the two bits I want to finish up with is some thoughts for you on skills first recruitment and management. So the way we used to do recruitment is we looked at a job and we said, well, a person needs a PhD to do that job. So we'll go looking for people with PhDs and we'll advertise the job on that basis. Skills first recruitment requires an assessment of what skills are required in order to do the job. Then you describe the job. And if you're still coming out with a mismatch of management consultancy terms, you go back to your assessment and you go around again. And you narrow it down to the core skills that are required in order to do this job. Okay? And a lot of those core skills are durable skills, because technical skills can be taught and they're entirely perishable anyway. So once you have it described, you advertise, and if you get no applicants, then you've done it wrong, so you need to go back to your assessment and try again. And then interview and recruit. So there's lots of implications in there for how and why we develop/enable people, and in what ways we develop/enable people. Coaching as a skill is incredibly durable. It's also incredibly transferable. You can transfer a coaching skill from business to coaching the under 15s, and well done to Brian's team. It's incredibly transferable. It's incredibly durable. I want to give you another example, though. Anybody ever heard of RAL Space? So RAL Space make bits for satellites. And a member of RAL Space's team was on the chase. That's fine, Christine, no problem, thanks. Was on the chase a while ago. And Bradley Cooper, that's not Bradley Cooper, it's Bradley Walsh, sorry, Ron Bradley, said, you know, and what do you do? And she said, well, I make blah, 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 blah. I'm a insulation technician or something, she said. And he said, oh, what's that? And she said, well, you know, when you look up at a satellite and you see the shiny bits, she said, I make the shiny bits, but I'm not an engineer. I ran a craft business, and RAL Space were looking for engineers and they couldn't get any. So they went back to what skills are required in order to build these space blankets, as they're called. And what they decided they needed was crafters, people who make things. And they hired Angela. If anybody's interested, I'll put up the links to a couple of videos with Angela, but it's really interesting. Forecasts, crystal ball, a move away from central L&D. Now, that's going to have implications for you guys because you're not going to any longer be dealing with one central point within these big companies. Okay, it's going to be HR, you know, the way there are HR BPs, it's now going to be L&D BPs. Okay, they're close to the business. They know exactly what each individual team is looking for and needs. It's going to be a move away from synchronous, gathering 10 people either physically or virtually into a room at 9 o'clock on a particular morning and keeping them there till 5 o'clock. That day is done. It's going to be a move towards asynchronous / super flexible learning. And a move away from the time intensive thing of it taking weeks and months and potentially years to gain an accredited qualification. We need to move towards true assessment of existing skills and accreditation of existing skills so that people get, whether they be ECTS credits for their existing skills, which have been measured and assessed and feed towards their qualification, or whether it gets them, you know, a micro cred based on a test that they do. And a number of micro creds build up to a full cred. Anybody got any remaining questions? Roisin.
Just a question on the last slide, Maura,
Yeah.
around the move away from synchronous towards asynchronous. But ideally, if there's a blend, because there still is a great need for synchronicity and the live real-time learning and piggybacking ideas of each other, and you know, that brainstorming piece that can be very creative and dynamic. So there definitely, my belief is there's still definitely space for that. It's just about how you blend it with asynchronous opportunities so that things aren't necessarily being duplicated, that you're freeing space up. If you're doing one, to be able to do something else to build on that in the other.
Yeah, I suppose the most interesting example of this that I've had experience with is it was a truly blended model. So some of the program was delivered in the virtual environment. Some of the, you know, the kind of stuff that we used to do in training where we get people to fill in a questionnaire in the training room. And any bit of energy there was in the room just died at that point. So it was it was always a really bad plan anyway. But all of that stuff was taken offline and people were asked to have the questionnaires and the readings done before they came into the room. So there was those two pieces. But the third piece, the kind of brainstorming, collaborating, networking, creative piece, was also taken out of the training room. And people were required to meet up. It could be virtual or in real life, made no difference, but they were required to meet up outside of the training room to discuss 2 or 3 specific questions and to bring back answers into the training the following day. So that meant the training, the actual synchronous piece could be cut down to an hour and a half. And for me, it's definitely heading that way. And the amount of synchronous time is only getting smaller.
I think my belief that I still think there's scope for it. It's about how you logically think out and design the mix of the synchronous and the asynchronous together to get the most of the full holistic learning experience. So it's about just sort of logically thinking, what can we best use our time for together, and what can we do outside the classroom space or the training room that extends the learning opportunities, really.
I agree. You're very welcome, Julie. Thank you. I can only tell you from my own personal experience that when I'm going into companies now to discuss their requirements or their needs or what they want a development intervention to look like, they're all saying, cut down the time. Can we do this without, having even a half day in a room together? That's what they want. And the one thing that we know for sure is that industry drives this. They drive all of the changes in this field. They always have, they always will. Whatever we may want pedagogically, it doesn't have a huge amount of resilience to industry needs and wants, unfortunately.
So can I ask, is that better? Is that best that we follow what they want?
Well, the alternative for me is to go out of business. So yeah. They because there was so much change during the pandemic. Thank you, Paul. There was so much change during the pandemic. People discovered new ways of working. They discovered LinkedIn Learning, 5-minute courses here and there. They discovered all sorts of things that they hadn't been doing before. They don't want to go back. Thank you, Sylvia. They don't want to go back. So now when you're talking to either L&D staff or HRBP staff, they're saying, no, we want short, sharp interventions. I need you to video it. I need you to put it on our LMS. Do you have this stuff already pre-recorded and you can then answer questions in the asynchronous environment afterwards? That's what they want. And as I say, my alternative is to go out of business. Your alternative, I don't know. Can you push back on it as the pedagogical experts? Maybe more successfully than I could. Are you going to get dragged there eventually? Probably.
I think there's definitely room for both, and obviously you listen to what your audience wants and needs, but there are research studies out there that people that ask for the asynchronous or, like the recordings, they don't actually, because time is so precious and people are time poor, they don't have time to actually watch the recordings asynchronously. They might think it's great to have a bank of such resources and think, oh, I get to that at some point, which we would all love to do. But I just think, there's a lot in there, going forward. Yeah.
No, I agree. Particularly when it comes to, these LMSs with hundreds and hundreds of programs and hundreds of bits in them, and nobody's looking at any of it. Something else that's happening in the junior L&D staff space, thanks, Catherine, is that a job has been created essentially for LMS curators. And the LMS curator's job is to watch all of these crappy bits of video and make recommendations about which bits actually have value, which bits are worth it, which bits map to each team, so that, and then provide the links so that there might be 5 links to 5 little videos that would be specific to each team. So they get a link saying, this is your 5. Each of them is 5 minutes, a maximum of 25 minutes. I'm here to answer any of your questions afterwards, blah, blah, blah. And it takes the overwhelming, oh God, I don't even have time to find the right one I want, out of it. A job for an algorithm? Yeah, possibly. The algorithm can't determine how off-putting an American accent is telling you to do stuff, though. And quite a lot of LinkedIn Learning has that problem.
Can I come in at this point, Maura, because we've gone beyond 3 o'clock, and I know people have classes and meetings to go to, and I do want to tell the people who are still with us about an exciting event. But first of all, there's probably a zillion more questions, Maura. So I think we will have to have you back at some stage. And thanks to the audience for great engagement. But really, thank you, Maura, for that tour de force exposition of the learning and development sector in Ireland at this particular time. And it was really, really useful for me, and I think for others, to get the numbers, the stats, and the empirical data, because I think we all love to know, to get that insight into what people are thinking and where people are at. So it's really, really good to have those numbers, Maura. So thank you again, and we would love to continue the conversation with you. Just to say to people who have been with us all term, thanks for coming along to the community of practice. Our next community of practice won't be until the 25th of September. As always, we are the last Wednesday in every month, but we will be not running over the course of the summer. So Wednesday, the 25th of September, 2 p.m. is our next community of practice. But we have one more exciting event before then, and that is our Future Talent Forum, which is taking place in the East Quad. It's an in-person event. It's on Thursday, the 20th of June. And what we're talking about is generative AI and how that is shaping the talent pipeline. So if you are interested in that event, you can go onto the Eventbrite page and you find it. Or if you just want to send me an email, I can do the rest. You can contact me through Teams or an email. It's brian.a.murphy@tudublin.ie, because there's 3 Brian Murphys in TU Dublin, so that .a is important. brian.a.murphy@tudublin.ie. So thanks a million to everyone, especially to Maura O'Toole. That was brilliant, and it's great to finish this semester on a high with a really, really engaging community of practice. Thanks a lot, Maura.